reps, but it may not help after that at all. Where lighter may not improve those, but it may help you transitioning to an upright and some upright running. So I think the first stop for me is what's the objective today? What are we working on? What distance and what skills are we working on? And that makes the decision on load. And we do a lot of variance loads on acceleration runs, and we want to see how they're handling load. So if we got 18 kilos versus 12 versus 6 versus 2, are there any big changes in these kinematic positions that we're seeing? Because that might give us an insight on what their bias is or where maybe we need to do a little bit more work. So say we got an athlete that's excellent at lighter loads, but at a little bit heavier loads, they change what their body is doing to keep it going. Well, that kind of gives us an insight on where they're biased to solutions when they're in doubt or they're challenged.
Yeah, because they're going to go where they feel comfortable, what they've done the most.
You're going to use your best bullet. So we see a lot of field court sport guys have a lot of shin roll and knee drop on that front leg to start. Well, why are they doing that? Well, that puts a huge stretch on the quadriceps because their best bullet is the quadriceps. They don't know how to fire the glutes and the erectors. They know how to fire the quad, so they have a lot of shin roll, drop that knee and get a great stretch on that quad, and bam, they hit a nice line. And you're like, see that line of attack? It was awesome, but the pelvis didn't go anywhere. It actually went down before it came up, and it didn't travel very far because you spent all that time dropping instead of being productive. So the net looked really good, but if you dig down into the nuances, you didn't go anywhere.
And that wouldn't happen unless you were looking at that third, fourth, fifth step, like you talked about.
Yep.
Now, why, like, even for me, I'm feeling stupid listening to him, like, son of a gun. Why didn't I think about that? Like, why isn't that being talked about as much?
Well,
maybe it is, and I'm just the idiot. Like, that's fine.
No,
no. You can say
this is common. I mean, this is a space I work in. I think it starts with, first of all, the resistance to a biomechanical model and the bandwidth allowances in that model. So people don't know what the body segments and postures and angles are at various steps in a run. So if you don't have a model that you're analyzing against, why would you analyze it?
Makes sense.
So if you got a guy doing a 45-degree cut and you don't know what those first 3 or 4 steps out of the cut look like on a good mover versus a bad mover, where you're analyzing components, then why would you even try to analyze if you don't know what they are?
You going to come up with a bandwidth for, like, your hammer analogy? There's one way to swing a hammer with the bandwidth. Is there a hammer for changing direction on all sports? Or are you going to make a bandwidth within each sport and then each position? Or is it just going to be relative to size and body weight and relative strength?
Yes, all the above. No, I think you're going to have general postures, segmental positions, and angles that address all sport. And then the width of that bandwidth might be sport development stage, it might be injury compensation, it might be time of season, it could be health or, all kinds of things. So the bandwidth is what fluctuates, but the model line doesn't fluctuate, if you will.
Oh, that's again something to think about, because you're right. Like, I'm as we're talking, I'm thinking about, like, okay, yeah, if we're doing a 45-degree upcut, the first thing I'm looking at is anticipating when they make that change in direction, and I want to see steps 1 and 2 and which way they're going. But after that, if you're in a team sports setting, you're probably like looking at the next athlete go, so you're not even actually watching your athletes do steps 3 through 5, let alone wondering what it looked like.
Yeah, well, I think we get caught up in early payday. If those first 2 steps out of the cut look good, we're job done.
Taking a quick break from the show, everybody. Promise this will take less than 15 seconds. Friendly reminder, go ahead, hit that subscribe button below. It helps us out, and it helps you out by being notified whenever we have new content come out. So hit that subscribe button, and with this, let's get back to the show.
How do we balance that with the same thing that being taught of, like, okay, if within a kinematic sequence and understanding, like, hey, if somebody did A, B, I'm actually answering my own question. Like, okay, within the the lift, if somebody was at the bottom, the mid, and the top, and that's what they looked like throughout it, probably pretty good. Well, we're only looking at the first 2 steps. We're not looking at the rest of it. So that, I answered my own question as I was
Yeah,
asking.
and people go, oh, you're doing my head in. This is beyond my pay grade. Strength coaches do a great job in the weight room. You got starting postures and angles, you got mid lift postures and angles, and you got finish angles, and then catching angles. You have a model in there, and you have a bandwidth. So if you got a middle school kid, the bandwidth's a little wider on some of those. Where if you're training Olympic level Olympic lifter, the bandwidth is very narrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we already have that tool. PTs have that tool in the clinic. Like, you don't see any PT say, well, just do the rubber band thing how you feel. They're like, okay, put your wrist here, your fingers here, go to here, feel this tension, go to here. They have a model. But then when it comes to the field, it's like, oh, there's no model.
There's and as getting, again, full circle, getting back to what you said, there is a growing model for sprinting and upright running, the linear stuff, but there is less and less on the decelerative and the change in direction work.
Yeah, that's why I'd encourage people to look into Damien and guys like that are doing pioneer work there.
And it's a blue ocean right now because there's not as many people doing it.
Well, you can build a mousetrap. Everybody's bitching about building their business. Well, add a layer to your toolbox.
As you were talking about, the different, the 1080 or the other product, and again, it wasn't just them, it's any of these new tech things out on the field. From somebody that has been around and seen this field evolve for so long, looking back, in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s and the 10s and now the 20s, like, it would be impossible for me to be like, oh, figure out the, like, globally, what have been the good and the bad, and just to hear from somebody that is whether you're going to say it or not, that is a giant in this field, like, just talk about the evolution and the pros and the cons in the weight room and on the field.
Well, you remember the Genome Project?
The movie?
No, where they figured out the genome, the DNA, and all of that, and it was going to revolutionize medicine.
Yes.
Well, that was 30 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing?
It depends on who you ask and where you ask it, right?
Well, I think it's the same thing with tech. Like, it's how you use it, when you use it. A lot of people collect data and it just sits on a server. Like, can you get buy-in from the athlete, from the coaching members and whatnot? So it's not just enough to have a technology instrument that collects really reliable, valid data. It's like, what do you do with it? What are the action points? How do you teach it? How do you build bridges between stages of evolution, using that technology? So I think the gap is in pedagogy. We don't know how to teach with the data that we're being received.
Because we're getting bogged down by the results, or because we don't know what we're teaching?
Probably both.
Yeah. Because there's probably not enough people though doing because the reason I ask this question is from somebody like you with the background at, LSU and the colleges, and then with USA track and field, like, there was no other technologies. There was none of this. Oh, I don't feel good, and this number tells me not to do it. It was like, hey, we're going to lift, we're going to run. And it's okay if you don't feel like great. You kind of just had to work through it all. So you had to learn and earn your stripes, for lack of a better term. So you understand how to coach it better, which was why I was wondering, like, your take on it all, because it was like, hey, look, we're going to do some of these basic and just build general strength in the weight room as we continue to get better running on the field.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.